Welcome to Chapter 2. This chapter we're going to cover international management and cultural diversity. Make sure that you take thorough notes, as of course you'll find this information on your chapter assignment as well as quizzes and exams. So let's jump in. There are some introductory ideas that the authors cover within this chapter about globalization and business. And we're looking from things from a global perspective, that's an international perspective, and understanding that many of our very complex products that we build have different components from several countries. You can have something from 3 different countries in Europe, 3 different countries within Africa, 2 in Asia, 6 in the United States, 3 in South America, 2 in Central America. So you get my drift. So it's rare to see a lot of complex products that are built from components from within just one sole country. It can happen, but for the most part, they're coming from all over. Our Apple iPhones, other cell phones, their different components are taken from different places. All of our cell phones have a mineral that comes from Africa. So with that, just taking that into consideration, that we have to be more global in the way we do business, in the way we relate, the way we think. You have to be able to think global and then, of course, act local. And one management challenge is to be able to work well with organizations and people from other countries, because you're having to take in consideration different values and beliefs and customs. Some of you may have heard of or may actually have experience working within a multinational corporation. That's where they have units in 2 or more countries plus their home countries. So they may have headquarters here in the United States, and then they also have location in 2 other countries or more. A transnational corporation will operate worldwide, and they don't have one national headquarters. So there's no quote-unquote foreign operations, right? They operate worldwide, globally. And because of the process and the reality of globalization, many of our large companies have had to merge with each other. Oftentimes it's not willingly, right? And that's where the process of mergers and acquisitions. You have some companies that are acquired by another company, and others where they've decided to merge together to pool together their resources. So now you have fewer competitors as a result. An example can be your telephone service provider that will merge with your cable or satellite provider, or your cell phone provider, things of that nature. So some of this information, if you've taken our Management 1100 course, which is our Principles of Management, which is a class that I also teach, you'll see some overlap with the content that is being taught. So you will remember we talked about in that class trade agreements. We talked about diversity and globalization. So there should be a layering effect for those of you that have already taken the Principles of Management class. So what a lot of people don't realize is that trade agreements amongst countries is what makes it possible for us to buy and sell consumer goods. The shoes that we wear, the bags that we carry, the equipment that we have, so on and so forth, are often based on the strengthened relationships between countries through trade agreements. So within North America, which of course includes the United States, Canada, and Mexico, those three countries make up North America, we have our NAFTA, and that's agreement amongst those three and how we trade products just between the three of us. And there have been a lot of companies that have benefited from NAFTA. Although there has been, it's been said that labor unions have said that there's been job loss due to the trade agreement. So there's some conflicting reports on how companies have benefited from trade, while it seems as though there's been a turnover as far as job loss within organizations. So based on that, about 500,000 of workers were displaced by the 10th anniversary of NAFTA. So within 10 years of NAFTA being established, 500,000 workers were either laid off, fired, or underemployed. And we also have trade agreements with other countries. One larger conglomerate of countries that we work with is we have with 6 other countries, and it's the Central American Free Trade Agreement, which then of course covers hence Central America, right? And so that allows them to basically have open access to the American marketplace where they can be able to trade freely within the U.S. And it also allows for easier access into their markets as well. The goal of CAFTA is to be able to have a 34-nation free trade agreement where you have all of the countries in the Western Hemisphere included. When this was printed, this was in 2012, and of course we were still part of the embargo and different things with Cuba, so Cuba was not included in CAFTA. The goal, of course, would be redefined to include Cuba so that it would then be a 35-nation free trade agreement amongst all those countries. We'll see what takes place. So the EU, some of you may have been reading in the newspaper or watching on CNN International or elsewhere about the EU, which is the European Union. And the EU has 27 nations that are included with that, and they create a single marketplace where they're able to do an exchange of goods, services, investment strategies, as well as ideas. And they will all trade with their member nations, which includes, of course, U.S. and Canada. And within the EU, it creates one space where the citizens of the European Union can be able to work, invest, travel, as well as use their currency, which is the euro. Now we have the WTO, which is the World Trade Organization, and that allows for trade amongst nations all around the world. And what they're trying to be able to do with the WTO is to lower some of the barriers that have been set up amongst 153 countries, so that people within those countries have the ability, countries within those countries have the ability to trade with other countries. And this is important, some would say, Because when you look at different countries that are landlocked, if they don't have the ability to trade with other countries, then they will eventually bankrupt themselves. They'll financially implode because there's no way to build an economy without some level of trade. Now, with that, the most favored nation clause that is included within their agreement requires that every country that's involved to give all of the other countries their best agreement as it relates to trade. And what the WTO does is they help to settle disputes amongst those countries. Now, people have accused the WTO of creating a lot of the job cuts and pushing wages down, right? Where you're then forcing wages to go down. And so it's, there have been some, of course, praise of WTO, and some people who have been huge advocates speaking out against WTO. Now, people oftentimes want to know exactly how trade agreements work. And basically, that allows you to send work overseas, which is also considered outsourcing. That's one of the things that a trade agreement allows. So it allows, of course, the trading of products. It also allows you to be able to send workers from your country to another country, or to be able to outsource work from another country's workers to be able to do labor for your organization. So, for instance, having a relationship with India or a particular country within Asia, you can then be able to outsource some of your technical or communication needs to workers within that country, where you can then be able, honestly, to pay lower overhead costs than you would in your home country, specifically the United States. So, the number of industries that are immune to outsourcing is shrinking, meaning that more and more companies and industries, are actually being impacted by the outsourcing phenomena. They're not being able to say, "Oh, we can avoid it," because as demand grows, so is the need for supply, and that's basic economics. And with that, you're trying to find a way to keep your costs lower, and one of your largest costs, as I explained before, one of your largest costs in your corporation will be your people, your human resources. And so if you can find a way to reduce that cost, a lot of companies are being forced to do so, and they're outsourcing the work. Now, another major force behind outsourcing is the pressure of mass discount stores such as dollar stores, Target, Walmart, right? Because they're trying to keep their prices as low as possible. And the only way to keep your price low is your labor has to be low. The only way your labor can be low is you have to outsource it. You're going to have a plant, either a plant in another country or an agreement with a manufacturer or distributor in another country that will pay a fraction of what you have to pay labor here in the United States. So with this, there's a case for global outsourcing. And this case is that it can create a new demand for lower priced goods, which they believe can lead to more jobs in the U.S., which is more jobs for, folks that live here. They believe that you can become more competitive because your production costs have been lowered, and that there will be a reciprocity agreement between our country and other countries. That, since we're doing it for you, you can do it for us. Since you're doing it for us, we can do it for you. And basically, any country that receives work from the U.S. might consider hiring more American workers for their U.S. operations. So when you have a company who sets up a operation here in the U.S. and they're from another country, so let's say it's Brazil or Nigeria or Japan, wherever, and they set up operations here in the United States, the case for global outsourcing is that, there's potential that they would hire American workers to work within those businesses. Now, on the flip side, it could also be responsible for permanent job loss and slow job creation, right? Because people are then out of work, and you're not being able to really create jobs if you're not inspired to, you don't have the resources to, and if something's being outsourced, there's no real reason to create a job here. Now, a second point is that American employers here can be able to offer lower wages to domestic employees because work can be sent overseas. And that is one of the biggest issues, is that I now can, instead of offering you $15 an hour, I can now offer you $8 an hour, I'll just say. Because if not, I can just do it overseas and only pay $1 an hour, right? Now, many of you may have called into the customer service lines for your cable, your cell phone provider, any number of services that you have, and you immediately realize that you're speaking to someone who their first language is not English. And oftentimes they're struggling to communicate a message to you or to fully understand the message that you're trying to convey. And that is what happens when call centers are outsourced, that it can create a lot of language barriers. And of course it creates frustration, and then you have Americans saying, I want to speak to an American, I need to speak to an English speaking person, I don't want to speak to you, blah, 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 blah. This other point, the fourth point about global outsourcing, is that no one really knows what the true cost savings are from doing this. We really don't know how much industries and organizations save by outsourcing. It's not crystal clear. And that's because you would have to have tracked the difference between your outsourced labor and your in-house labor from the inception of, the moment you had started outsourcing, to be able to do a comparison. And, all of the industries would have to provide that information for researchers to really be able to see the true savings, if any, from this process. So one thing that is very important, whether it is with your customers, your employees, or vendors, is having a sensitivity, an awareness, a empathetic viewpoint of the cultural differences that we have. And that is important when dealing with international workers, like I said, with our customers and our vendors. And you have to be aware of all local, regional, and national customs, values, and beliefs, and how they can actually impact your interpersonal relationships within the organization and externally. Now, you have to look at your various personality factors and how emotionally stable a person is. Because, especially um, if you are relocating any of your workers to another country, and if a person is already sporadic and in, like a emotional roller coaster, it may not be in your best interest to transfer them to another country, because they're having to then deal with so many variables at the same time that oftentimes they're not successful in that host country. On there's a right there, I'm going to take you to the next slide so you can be able to see and read further about developing global leadership skills. It's very important. And for those of you that are thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to be working overseas, you don't know what you may be doing in 5, 10 plus years. But it's not even that, is being able to interface with people via phone, Skype, any other kind of web conferencing, email, instant messaging, in addition to the fact of anyone who happens to come to the U.S. from another country. So you have to be able to have those various leadership skills developed and refined, and making sure that you're constantly sharpening those skills. Now, one thing that is important is that you'll see where they'll talk about, especially if you watch any kind of the financial news channels, or if you read any financial newspapers, where they're always tracking the fluctuations in currency. They need to know if the euro or the dollar or the yen, if it's going up, going down, if it's staying steady, how it's doing. Because if the value of your currency drops or increases significantly, it can make exporting very difficult, because the cost of being able to export a product can go up considerably. And so they're having to always track that. How strong is the US dollar in another country? If you go to Zimbabwe, um, the currency there has little to no value. You bring $100 or $1,000 US into Zimbabwe and do an exchange so that you can get their currency, and you could have an entire shopping bag filled with money. That just shows you how weak their currency is. So what that does is you look at the cost in exporting for them, and even importing, right, for them, because they're going to have to spend considerably more within their currency structure in order to cover the cost on the flip side. So it's looking at all those things. As a general rule of thumb, it's better to export goods than it is to import. The reason being, your products are going out, right? And you're being is once it ships sail and it docks on the other side, and you're paid for it, you're good to go, right? Trying to then import products, there can be a major trade imbalance that you can experience. It can be very difficult to deal with some of those issues. So you'll be able to read more about that in chapter 2. There are 3 other major things that you have to consider. Are any violations to human rights, any corruption and violence within a country, even your home country? You may have that customers may be a little ticked off, or they may object to you manufacturing, creating any kind of product from a country that has some human rights violations, right? Where there's genocide taking place, where there's war taking place, where the governmental structure is highly, highly, highly corrupt, where there's violence against women, right? And so with that, you can face a lot of challenges that way. This is something that happens whether you are, and this happens with military, and it happens with any worker that you send to another country, and that's culture shock. It can happen within the country as well. If you send them to a different region of the country, that they're having to interact with people that don't look and sound like them. But for this part, we're going to keep it globally. This can happen when you're dealing with different cultures, or just one culture that is completely different than yours. You don't know the language, you don't know the customs and the values, and you just go into absolute shock. You just break down, and you really want to go home. Well, the truth can also occur when you return home right away. You come home after being gone for an extended period of time, and you may have, really acclimated into another culture, whether forcefully or not. And then when you come back home, you're then blindsided by the ways in which people conduct themselves, how things move, how quickly transportation is, whatever. So you can have culture shock on both ends. Differences in negotiating style. Outside of the U.S., for the most part, when you go to a market, you go to a store, they're really into negotiating. If an item is $5, they're kind of expecting you to say, I'll pay $3 for it. They want to be, it's a negotiation kind of thing. And so the same is true when you have people that come from other countries, right? And they see that your item is marked as $5, and they say, I'll give you $3 for it. You're like, are you out of your mind? It's $5, right? So you have to be more patient and more formal, and understanding that there is a difference in negotiating style, in how things are perceived. When you're trying to get costs lower, you can't get frustrated when someone's not budging. It literally is like a dance. Something else that has to be taken into consideration is our IP rights, your intellectual property rights. Those are things that any kind of visual, audio, any kind of written, any patents, technology, any kind of things of that nature that someone could steal and replicate, or steal and sell to someone else. And so you're having to look out for that, looking out for the theft and bootlegging of merchandise. So, when I went to Mexico in the 1990s, and it was hilarious because I saw what I thought was a Tommy Hilfiger bag, and I was like, oh my gosh. And this was back when Tommy Hilfiger was like really huge. And I'm up here like, ha! They got Tommy Hilfiger in Mexico. And then I looked closely, and although it was the emblem, it said Tommy, one said Tommy Hill Ranger, one said Tommy Hilfiger, it was like, and none of them said Tommy Hilfiger. Like everything was misspelled. But the thing is that you saw that logo. And so piracy is a huge thing. Having to cope with defective as well as dangerous products, and understanding that there may be a need for a product recall. These are risks that you take when you are doing business, if you're having things manufactured overseas. So developing your global leadership skills is your ability to really focus on how you can deal with people effectively that come from different cultures than your own. And it's not just racial cultures, it is religious cultures. It is just a nationalistic stance. Um, America, right? We have this, you're an American, even though very interesting enough, America is not just the US, America includes Mexico and Canada. But for whatever reason, when we say America, we're only thinking of the US. And so that's a cultural kind of um, aha for, for us. Um, and we have to find a way to combine our leadership skills and our cultural sensitivity so that it meshes well, because you are having to take on a position of authority and have the autonomy to make decisions, and you're representing a company, an industry, a brand, and believe it or not, you represent your country. If you work for an American company, guess what? You represent America. And that's just how people see it. So one good tactic is to being very open and welcoming of other cultures. Being open arms. What's the problem? They're humans just like you. And you have to be able to understand how well the management principles from your culture transfers to another. Being able to see the similarities, the nuances, and the differences, and but also how the different principles can be aligned. So we have different methods into how we can actually enter into a world market. You can export your good to other countries. There's licensing and franchising, right? So you can give the licensing rights to your product. So someone has a license for a certain period of time where they can use your company's logo, branding, so on and so forth. Franchising is if you decided to pop up a Subway in Saudi Arabia, for instance. That's one way you could be able to then get Subway in Saudi Arabia. Doing local assembly and packing. That's where the product is assembled and it's packed in a host country and then shipped back to the home country for distribution and sales. The strategic alliances and joint ventures. Strategic alliances are when two organizations, see they have some shared interest, and they say, we want to be able to work together when the time is right. We want to be able to sometimes share resources or be able to piggyback off of a deal with each other or refer a vendor or so on and so forth. They have this is outward kind of expression of we're cool. And sometimes it's short term, sometimes it's long term. A joint venture is literally when you come together, and a joint venture oftentimes is short term. Your two companies, your corporations, come together for a specific deal. And you'll see a lot of joint ventures, for instance. And I'm just going to use this example like within the music industry where you'll have two companies come together for a particular album. Or the same is true when you're talking about any other kind of global relationship. Then you can have a direct foreign investment. That is where you can have an actual injection of monies into your country or into your corporation from a foreign entity. And then, of course, the global startup. That's when a small organization starts off by serving within an international market. Right? They immediately come through the gates, um, and they are, operating in Australia, and that's what a global startup is. So there's various success factors within. As I said earlier in the beginning of this presentation, is where you're thinking globally and acting locally. So you're always looking at the big global picture. You're always taking into consideration what is going on in other countries. How is war impacting them? How is the economy impacting them? So on and so forth. But then you're making sure that the decisions that you make, that you're focusing locally on your state, your country, your economy. Right? You're making sure you're taking care of those in your neighborhood through your company. And you're making sure that you're recruiting and selecting talented workers. And you need to make sure that they're the right people for the job in those countries. You're making sure that you're getting people who are local, right? Because what happens is then they know the cultural norms, they understand the customs and the values and the belief system, but you have to make sure they are also the right individuals for the job. And then, of course, making sure that you have strong workforce from those within your home country that you intend to um, either relocate to another country, or you're just having the interface here locally, but globally they're having an interface with people in other countries. And multiculturalism is something that is very important, because you're then having a consistent reflection upon um, your place in the global marketplace, and you're hiring or developing the workers within your organization who are multicultural. The fourth point is your ability to both research and assess the potential markets that you can move into, that you can expand into. And that requires you getting detailed, very valid information about those markets. So knowing that if you're trying to go into South Korea, you're trying to go into England, you're trying to go into Italy, you're trying to go into South Africa, so on and so forth. You're having to get a lot of information and making sure that it's valid, it's current, and that it's applicable to your organization. So, no matter how we want to look at it, there are some advantages and disadvantages of globalization, and the truth is that it's inevitable, right? It is not possible for us to stop the world from getting smaller. And what I mean by that is that it's not possible to stop us from doing business with other countries and people from other countries. Unfortunately, many employees have created more problems than opportunities through globalization. And when you look at Exhibit 2.4, you can see some of the pros and cons um, that have just surfaced through this. And two are that, of course, there have been millions of U.S. workers that have lost jobs, and that productivity grows with the use of a comparative advantage. So those are two things that you, of course, look for when you're considering the pros and cons. But look at Exhibit 2.4 for greater details on that. Now, when we talk about diversity, it is not just black and white, right? not just rich poor. It is that we have um, people with various and varying levels of intelligence, of physical capability, of mental capability. We have people that have different um, views on their gender, sexual orientation, and sexual preferences. And we have a very, very fast growing aging population where our baby boomers, and those are those that were born in the 1950s, 1940s, where they are still, of course, in the workplace. And um, for some of them who thought they would be retiring um, over the past, 5 to 10 years, are realizing they're being forced to have to continue to work. And so that can cause some frustration for them, and and also for other workers, because you're then dealing with a cultural difference, especially when you're looking at technology. So you have to be able to find a way to work well across generations. It's very important. Inclusion is vital for the success of any organization, and making sure that we are including our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender employees, and that we are also making sure that we are not being excluding, or we're not excluding, and we're not discriminating against people based on their religion and their religious clothing, and clothing that is cultural in general. So there's a competitive advantage of incorporating and really embracing diversity within your organization. Increase sales and profits, which leads to a marketing advantage. You can reduce your costs because your turnover is lower, right? People are not quitting, right? People are not being fired, they're not being laid off, whatever. Um, so you're keeping your costs low. You can actually recruit some very talented people because now your vision is broader. You're not limiting it to just white males ages 25 to 35. You're expanding your view. It can also provide you a lot of useful ideas for that can help with advertising and bringing some positive publicity to your organization. You can reduce the number of biases that you have, and reducing some of those cultural bloopers where you assumed a person was Muslim and find out they were actually Sikh, or um, it's just different things like that, where you have various, bloopers that you put both feet right in your mouth. And so, because of all of this, it can actually help um, bring about more creativity and innovation within your organization. Now, some potential problems, of course, can be that not everyone's going to work well together, and um, diverse groups may actually be less cohesive, meaning they don't really blend and stick together well than those that have a less diverse composition. Sometimes when you have people um, that are from the same uh, country or group or culture or gender or whatever, sometimes they actually can work better together because they share the same wavelength, if that makes sense. It's not always the truth, but sometimes that can be the case. And so you're always having to make sure that you're not just trying to turn I'm not trying to intentionally make my organization look like global gumbo, and it's going to be a kumbaya, harmonious scenario each and every day, but making sure that you're putting people together who are also embracing the diversity and have an openness and a willingness to learn and work with other people. Because you can have a very diverse organization and have 20% of your labor force at ends with each other, where they're fighting. They've got, the countries where they come from may have been, experiencing years of war and things against each other, and they're bringing those cultural nuances into your organization. And so just understanding that there's always things, and you have to be able to manage and oversee all of that. And it cannot just be, well, we've got one black, one white, one Asian, one Native American, one, no. And they're going to just all get along. Okay. Yeah, all right. No, it's not that simple. It's not a little puzzle piece that you put together and you walk away. So you have to be able to be there to really embed um, your ethos and your values from your organization into the minds and hearts of your employees. So there are various organizational practices that encourage diversity, and those can be some corporate policies such as monitoring the recruitment and promotion of employees to make sure that it's reflecting the diversity within your organization, so that not only the white males get a promotion, or not only the Asian males get a promotion, or not only the black women get a promotion, but that you're seeing a reflection, a sample reflection of the employees within your organization. You can also create various employee network groups that can be broken up in demographics based on sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, whatever. And really one of the big things is having diversity training, and there can be a focus on harmony and acceptance and inclusion and dignity, and not the corny kind of diversity training where people tune out, but literally having people visualize walking in each other's shoes and seeing the more similarities than differences, and why people have chosen that company or chosen to be in that country or whatever, and to be able to see those dynamics at play. So with diversity training, it of course is endorsed by the CEO, your chief executive officer, and it can actually lead to better retention when it's linked to the strategic plan of the organization, when it's linked to something long term. It helps to increase awareness for other people, empathy for other people who are different than you, and it can minimize open expressions of racism, sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, xenophobia. It can help your organization and the employees to be able to strive for harmony by teaching how to get along with people that look and sound and act and think different than themselves. So the internet, of course, encourages the use of English, and many Asian and European businesses are making English their official language. And it's increasing the competitiveness within the marketplace because it's having international workers have to communicate with each other more effectively. And so English is really becoming a force for unity. And that's the argument that if you have more people speaking English, then there's more people being able to communicate and so on and so forth. But although we use English, if a second language for North Americans can actually help build relationships, and that second language really would be Spanish. So I would actually say we need 3 languages, right? we need Spanish and we need French to really help build strong relationships, because you do have, although um, you do have French as a very widely used language throughout parts of Asia and Africa. Um, but Spanish is one of the largest languages used, of course, in Spain, um, throughout Central, South America, Caribbean, um, and so it's making sure that we are not just making English the basic language, but that we're also incorporating and learning other languages here as well. So with that, you guys will take your chapter 2 assignment um, using what you've read, and of course, um, now that you're having a more in-depth look through this video, to be able to complete that assignment and the quiz. And then, of course, just participate in the weekly discussion. If you have any questions, please email me. And with that, have a wonderful day.